Charles Payne for a second, because Charles, I know you probably agree with a ton of what Jim had to say. You know, does this announcement, $800 billion this morning, is this freaking you out?
It's freaking me out, you know, and I got to John's point, you know, I went head-to-head with Jim for 3 years. I learned a lot from Jim Rogers. So. A lot of expensive lessons. I should have listened to him on many things. The one interesting thing, though, is as you guys have been talking, the market's been rocking and rolling, going much higher. You know what? Obviously, printing money historically has not been the answer, but it seems to be something that Wall Street likes because it seems like at this point that they're only rewarding the banks. In other words, to your point earlier, Jim, they're rewarding their own at this point. They're not doing anything for the consumer. They're not doing anything for the mortgage holder. And I think, you know, I don't know how this is going to resonate on Main Street, but right now it looks like Wall Street likes it.
Jim?
Well, of course, Charles, if you give me several $100 billion, I'll
show me a good time, too.
Yeah, of course, but this is all in the financial community. But Charles, we're ready for a rally. I mean, the market in October and earlier this month has had a huge selling climax. I covered a lot of my shorts. Who knows if I'm right or not, but I expect the market to rally for some time. It may rally into next year. But, Charles, this is a false rally. It's not going to be great. It's not the end of the problems in America, and it's not the end of the bear market.
Okay, so how long, Jim, in your mind, might this bear market last in the United States, and how low could we go?
That's as long as the politicians keep making mistakes. Why not 10 years? Why not 15 years? It's lasted 18 years in Japan, and we're doing the same things that Japan is doing. You know, Alan Greenspan went to Japan in the mid-'90s and said, you know, you're making a mistake. You should let people fail. You should clean up the balance sheets. You poor, stupid Japanese are making mistakes. And now we're doing exactly the same thing we told the Japanese they should not be doing.
That was the source of his irrational exuberance comments. He was really talking about Japan.
Of course he was. Of course he was. I know he was.
So, well, Mr. Summers went to Asia, too, as we remember, in 1997. And in 1994, he made a visit to Mexico, and those situations didn't work out that well either.
Yeah, that's what I said before. Mr. Geithner's been wrong 750 weeks in a row, and now we're saying you solved the problem.
Okay, but John, you worked during the Reagan administration. I said to you before when you were walking off the set, I said, look, I was talking to Sean Hannity on his radio show yesterday, and we were kind of arguing the finer points between the Reagan administration and the Clinton administration as to who says they created longer prosperity in this country. But what do when we look at when we could bring back prosperity, and realizing this could take some time, what are the fuel, the engine, what are the things we need to do to turn the story around?
Well, the first thing you need to get credit for a real big boom is to start with everything totally on the floor, because you get credit for the standing up again, or the recovery, and the Gipper had that. You know, we had 21% interest rates, 15% inflation at that time. The Dow was 860 at that time. How could you screw that up? And Obama's got some of that. So, I mean, he could look better than he deserves to look in this whole situation, and FDR, of course, walked into the same kind of situation.
But Roosevelt made a lot of mistakes.
Yeah, well, don't they all?
He threw a lot against the wall to see what would stick. Some of it did, and a lot of it didn't.
But most of it didn't stick. He did not solve the unemployment problem. He did not solve the economic problem.
Oh, in fact, you're right. The unemployment rate went up to 24.9 in 1934.
Things got worse.
You know, Jim, when I spoke to the CFO of Citigroup yesterday, Gary Crittenden, and I asked him about the global expansion story, he said he would take the emerging economies any day over any mortgage-backed security here in the United States. And I questioned him. I said, look, Japan is in a recession, Germany's in a recession, most of the largest countries in the EU are in a recession. And I assume, because you're the expert, that their growth will be better than ours. But can you rely on emerging economies to be safe in this kind of climate when they rely on our currency?
Well, first of all, Alex, I'm not an expert on anything. I'm a simple person from Alabama. I don't know much more than, I certainly don't know as much as these guys.
I don't know. Your returns have been pretty good.
I don't know any much, but I will say to you, the money is in Asia now. That's where they've been saving. You know, you're talking about saving here in America. We save less than 2% in America. In China, they save over 35%. Throughout Asia, they save and invest gigantic amounts of money.
But they have nothing to spend it on.
The economies are different.
Yeah.
We don't want too much of a
now there's more now.
They can buy Chevrolets. What are you talking about?
Come on, it's more recent.
You walk down to the shopping mall under my apartment in Beijing, you can buy Gucci, you can buy anything you want.
I consider that an imitation.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
No, but I mean, listen to John. He's exactly right. You can buy anything you want in China. Anything.
You know, this thing about Asia, to me, what's interesting is if you go there and you meet the kids, 20, 25-year-old kids, you will immediately come to this view. They're like kids here in 1950. You know, they want to make life right for their parents and their families. this century is going to be not the dinosaur century, but the human capital century. It's all there. And they're educating the dickens out of these kids.
Well,
and they're building optical fiber networks. And
are you familiar with the contradiff wave theory? It's a
Sure,
theory
of course.
of east-west control.
Yeah.
And it definitely seems, according to some of what Jim's saying, and what you're saying, is the shift from Western civilization is now shifting back to Eastern.
Well, it was most of
500
history,
years.
that's where it was.
It's a 500-year cycle.
We just got one bump.
You go back over the past
Let me ask my